the Hockey Hub. Glad you could join us. I'm Adam Pellerin, joined today I should say, Andy Brickley, looking ahead to the opener for the Bruins at TD Garden against the Montreal Canadiens. We'll look ahead to that. But Brick, how you doing?
I'm stellar, Adam. How are you?
I'm good. You're always stellar on game nights.
That's right.
Look to bounce back after an opening night loss to the Florida Panthers. We'll dive into that. We've got some special guests on the program as well. Shawn Thornton, who is the Chief Revenue Officer of the Florida Panthers, of course, former Bruin, will join us. His conversation with Judd is coming up. And Rick Middleton, Bruins great, will join us to talk about his team's induction into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, the Paralympic hockey sled team going into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. So looking forward to hearing those interviews. And Brick, looking forward to having you on the Hockey Hub podcast to get your insight and just talk about the game of hockey, whether it's the Bruins or hockey throughout New England.
Well, it is the greatest sport there is, the greatest team sport. We have the pleasure and we're lucky enough that we cover the Bruins on a daily basis. We get to watch every game, go to a lot of practices, travel with the team, etc. So we're fully invested in what's going on, and we're as close to it as any fan can be. So why not extend it even further and do a podcast or a vodcast?
Yeah, no question about that. And so we will get into the Bruins matchup against the Canadiens, talk about the home opener, but do want to go back to the opener in Florida against the Panthers. Obviously did not go well for the Bruins. They lose 6-4. And Brick, something that we didn't get into during the post-game show were some comments by Trent Frederic in regard to Matthew Tkachuk. Freddie tried to engage him, it looked like, on the ice. Tkachuk wasn't taking the bait, and this is what he had to say about it after the game.
Because he said yeah, and he didn't. So it's kind of hard when someone says he actually asked me because I was asking him, and he didn't. So it's hard to read that, but
he was trying to sucker you into dropping that glove, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess I didn't know people did that. I think that's kind of, it's a little disrespectful to the game.
All right, so Trent Frederic talking about Matthew Tkachuk. Apparently, Tkachuk had asked him if he wanted to go. Freddie was good to go, and then Tkachuk doesn't drop the gloves after the game. Frederic calls it disrespectful to the game. What's your take on that, Brick?
Yeah, I'd be curious to get Tkachuk's version of that same story. I mean, certainly based on what Trent has told the media and what we just listened to, it seemed like the perfect exchange for, do you want to dance? Yes, I want to dance. All right, let's dance. And then it doesn't happen. But, Matthew Tkachuk is that type of player that does a lot of things differently than most players. He gets under people's skins, whether it's, the extra little face wash or the stick rides up by the helmet, or, he's just one of those guys, and you can put any name to it you want, but he just disturbs his opponent with the way he plays and the way he conducts himself. And sometimes it's just not straight up, and it can really anger different players. And, one thing I think Trent Frederic has done through this part of his career, as part of his development, is to learn when to do just that. And I think Trent was trying to get his team into the game more emotionally involved, and go after one of their core players that was bothering the Bruins with the way that he plays the game and his actions. And I appreciate that growth in Trent's game, to learn how to do it, when to do it, and how to do it. And as he gets closer to being very good at it, this seemed to be the right time. So based on the knowledge that we have, the information that we have, it seemed like the Florida Panther player just didn't own up to what the conversation was all about.
Panthers do a good job of getting under their opponent's skin. We saw that during their playoff run last year against the Bruins and other teams on their way to a Stanley Cup. But, Brick, they do a lot of other things well. However, I was surprised the Bruins' performance on opening night, disappointed because they knew what to expect. They knew there was going to be a lot of energy in the building. They knew what the Florida Panthers brought to the table, but the Bruins just didn't have a response.
No, they didn't. And it started, from the defensive blue line down below the goal line in their own zone, obviously. They couldn't retrieve pucks. They couldn't make plays coming out of their own zone. Nobody could get open for the defense when they did get their sticks on those pucks. There were just too many flips up the wall. There were too many wrap wraparounds. There were too many giveaways. There wasn't enough compete when the pucks were 50-50. The protection in front of their own net was almost non-existent on a number of the goals that were scored by the Panthers. So that's an area that definitely has to be 1,000% better when they play Montreal at home.
Yeah, as we look ahead now to the opener at TD Garden against the Montreal Canadiens, you think we'll see Jeremy Swayman make his season debut?
Yeah, I do. I think I know he wanted the net in Game 1, but it was logical not to. He just signed his contract, really hadn't had any practice time with the club, wasn't facing any NHL shots, and the emotional roller coaster that it might have been during the time of negotiation was just ending. It was still pretty raw. I don't think playing him in Game 1 was necessary, but I think with a little bit of time and a little bit of separation from that resolving of the contract, I think he's in a better place mentally. I never questioned his mental strength. And Bulldog is his nickname for a reason, and I fully believe that he will get the start in the home opener. Yes.
Yeah, so Jeremy Swayman looks like he'll be between the pipes for the Bruins in front of a home crowd at TD Garden that's going to be fired up. It's always exciting for the first home game. Obviously, we saw that in Florida. It was exciting for the Panthers for different reasons, raising the banner. But that first game at home, what is it like? From your perspective, whether it's when you played or as a broadcaster or even both.
Yeah, no matter where you are in your career, whether you're a newbie, a rookie, whether you're a guy that's been in the league for 7-8 years, whether you've been around for as long as, say, Brad Marchand has been around, you all share that same little bit of angst and excitement all mixed into one, and it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. It's not a feeling of dread. You're really looking forward to it. You got your fans in your building where you know that you can be a dominant team. In this case, they're coming off a poor performance, so there's some atonement there that has to be in place. You don't want to start the year 0-2. You don't want to lose that home opener. There's a lot to be excited about, but you know that you have to be better, so there is a little bit of pressure to address where the shortcomings were in Game 1. I would think from somebody that's new to the organization, it's ultra exciting, to put that Bruin jersey on and skate at TD Garden and what that should feel like for them. I certainly had that experience because I came from another franchise. When I came to Boston, I was at a nice point in my career in terms of how long I had been around. I was 27, 28. I had played 6-7 years in the league, so I could handle the emotions that come with playing in a home opener, especially in your hometown, having grown up 10 miles from the Garden. So I know what that feeling's like, and I expect Boston, whether no matter where you are in your career, that the effort will be there. I think the intelligent effort will be there, and I think the result will be there.
Against a Canadiens team that's coming off a back-to-back, playing Wednesday night and coming into TD Garden, this is a young Montreal Canadiens team. It had a decent start to the year last year, but sort of fell off, and they're, I believe, the third youngest team in the National Hockey League. They have some players with bright futures, and Cole Caulfield and obviously Juraj Slafkovsky. They're the number 1 overall pick a couple years back at 50 points last year. What do you think about this Montreal Canadiens team?
Well, you touched on it a little bit. My thoughts start with the young talent that they have, and if you allow them to be difference makers, if you allow them to play to their strengths and not dictate the game, but impact the game, there's no guarantee that you're going to win the hockey game if you allow that to happen. Now, keep in mind where we are in the season. I mean, everybody in that first week believes that, they have a pretty good team and that they have a chance to be a playoff team. Even the Montreal Canadiens might not be reality, but that's how they feel as a group inside that locker room. They have that believability that we can go out, we can beat these Bruins. They still are our rival. Let's go put out a good effort. They're reeling. They came off a bad performance in Game 1. Let's take advantage of that. Maybe there's a little doubt in their game. Maybe they haven't figured out how exactly they want to play, what kind of team they're going to be. And maybe with that little bit of gap as far as their mental toughness is and not having figured things out and just not playing well just yet as a group, it's because it's a new group, that maybe they can take advantage of it. So I don't think it's going to be an easy out, but I think given the way Boston should approach this game, that Boston should be victorious over this Montreal team that's still building.
And you mentioned last night, the post-game show, some divisional opponents on the schedule early, right? And so you had the Panthers, obviously, on opening night. You get the Canadiens, and then after the game against the Kings on Saturday, you get the Panthers again. So there's some important games early in the season.
Yeah, there are certain categories that you kind of focus on, without getting into analytics, just some basic columns and boxes you like to check, and one of those is, your record within the division. You can call them 4-point games if you want, but it's how well you play against your opponents in your division that can really help you be inside the top 3 within your division to have an automatic bid when it comes postseason. Home games is another one. Before we get into a lengthy list of things that you look for, your record in 1-goal games, your special teams, all that stuff. It all lines up to be whether you're going to be a middle-of-the-road team or if you're going to be a very good team. And if you're starting with 3 out of 4 within the division, hey, I'd rather be 2-1 than 0-3.
Yeah. No question about that. And, I'd asked you, about what the atmosphere of a home opener is like from your perspective. Was there any home opener in your career, it doesn't necessarily have to be in Boston, that stands out to you among the rest, or maybe an early season home game that sort of stands out where you were sort of like, wow, this is incredible?
Yeah, I missed some time. I should say I missed a lot of time, Adam, with injuries, and a lot of times I had all kinds of surgeries in the off season, and would I be ready for training camp? Would I even be available for game one? My favorite game one was not a home opener for me. We opened at home when I first came to the Bruins in the waiver draft in that 88-89 season. I had come from New Jersey. We had just lost to Boston a few months earlier in Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Final. And then I ended up coming to Boston. Game changer, life changer for me to come to Boston. But Terry O'Reilly was coaching, and he was loyal to the group that had gone to the Stanley Cup final the year before. So I wasn't gonna be inserted in the lineup in front of somebody that had obviously earned it from the year before. But Bobby Joyce was one of those kids. He had come from the Olympic team and been an impactful guy, and he got hurt in the home opener. So our next game was a day 2 later down in Hartford. And that felt like a home opener to me.
Yeah, right.
There were more Bruins fans down in Hartford than there were Hartford fans. And that was my first experience with that. And I was inserted in the lineup. I just, plug and play, right? I went into his spot, and I played on the left side with Kenny Linsman and Keith Crowder. So how lucky was I to, grab an opportunity to skate with those guys, talented players, experienced guys, guys that competed. Chow would go to the net for a guy his size, the way he got to the net was incredible. Kenny could dish the puck, great vision, and it just worked, and I was able to score a goal. My first game was a Bruin down in Hartford. We spanked them, I think, 7-2. So for me, that was kind of like my home opener that was most memorable when I wore a Bruins jersey.
About 2 hours, a little over 2 hours from Melrose to Hartford or so.
About an hour and a half. Might take you two, but me about an hour and a half.
Oh man, that's fantastic. Yeah, I look back on the home opener that really sticks out. It's an obvious one, from a fan perspective, and just covering the Boston Bruins is the banner raising ceremony in 2012 against the Flyers. Bruins ended up losing that game 2-1, but before the game, just to see the banner go up, to see all the Bruins legends, some who are no longer with us, taking part in that pregame ceremony, a lot like what we saw over the course of last year with the centennial celebration, seeing all of those legends walk into the building and all the different eras of Bruins hockey coming together as one, and it sort of reminds you of the Bruins organization and how they are a family, and that was certainly rang true in that ceremony. And if I recall, one Andy Brickley was the MC of that ceremony, and I'm sure you have some memories from that as well, being on the ice, feeling the energy from the crowd. And I know that you've been on the ice for, obviously as a player, but as a broadcaster, emceeing a lot of these ceremonies over the years. But that one, Brick, it was extremely special with the fact that the Bruins won their first Stanley Cup in 39 years.
Yeah, and having been on that squad in 1990, we won the President's Trophy, and then we lose in the final, and having gotten that close, and not to be able to get that Stanley Cup or the Stanley Cup ring or the banner, and then to be able to witness what that great team in 2011 did, and watching them win up in Vancouver in Game 7, and then a couple of months later when they did have the banner raising, to be asked to be the master of ceremonies, it totally caught me by surprise. It's not something that I do, or certainly didn't do at that time. But they asked me to do it, and how could I say no? And I said, yeah, I'd be honored and privileged to do it. And I was. My memory, Adam, says that it was picked up by whatever networks were covering the National Hockey League at that time, as would be expected. Right. And and I had thought about what I wanted to say. The Bruins had given me somewhat of a framework of a script, but wanted to make it sound like me, and. I do remember maybe emphasizing a little accent when I welcomed everybody back to TD Garden. But that was a thrill. That was a thrill from a broadcasting career. Yeah, pretty tough to top that.
Yeah, it is. It is. Hopefully we'll be talking about that next year with the Bruins. But first things first, the home opener against the Canadiens. I want to give you thoughts on some news that came down recently north of the border. Old friend Linus Ullmark, of course, traded to the Ottawa Senators in the offseason. Big story. With Jeremy Swayman signing his deal, just on this past weekend. Ullmark has signed an extension as well, 4 years, $33 million. And Brick, if you do the math there and you look at that, that is exactly what Jeremy Swayman got in terms of average annual value, $8.25 million. How about that?
Yeah, well, what's the natural reaction? One more goalie hug, right? Swayman set the bar, and, we watched it for 2 seasons, the two of them together, and how similar they were in their ability to deliver the results. And even though they went at it a little differently, they were such a tandem, the best in the league, and the numbers were great. They bear it out. The Bruins have won a lot of hockey with those two guys in goal, and I guess it was fitting that it's not 8 years because they're at different points in their careers, but 4 years for the same exact number. I appreciated that, and I don't know if there's been a conversation between the two goalies, the two former teammates, but I got a feeling probably.
Yeah, probably a conversation between the two. Linus Ullmark, do you think he could be a game changer in Ottawa? I know it.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do. I think he's in the sweet spot of his career in terms of his mental preparation. The hard years in Buffalo, and then the experience he had in Boston, and winning the Vezina, and just I think the way he approaches the game mentally. When you get to this point in your career, and then you've had the success after you've put in all the hard work that went. You weren't rewarded for it in terms of playing in the postseason, which is why all these guys, suited up for 82 every year, is to get into the tournament. And for that to not happen, even though playing well and trying to get better every day, and then to have the experience he had in Boston, I think with his willingness to go to Ottawa, look at that team, assess that team, say, I think this team's going to be really good within the next 4 years. I'm going to sign a 4-year deal extension with these guys when the time is appropriate. And I'm going to get paid, and I think he's ultra confident, and I think that team should improve this year. They went through a lot, as it's well documented, ownership, GM, coaching, all of that stuff, and it was a difficult time for these young players that really have nothing to lean on when it comes to these things in order to help them play better on the ice. So I think they're in a much more solidified position. I think they'll be a tough out this year, and Linus should really change their confidence level about staying in games and not giving up easy goals and falling behind and giving points away.
Yeah, new leadership in Ottawa, new head coach, front office, and some personnel on the ice. And, of course, Linus Ullmark leading the way. November 9th, by the way, is when the Ottawa Senators come to TD Garden. So that'll be an interesting game as well. Bruins just wrapping up their opening night game against the Florida Panthers. And, of course, familiar faces on the ice, former Bruins, but in the front office as well. Chief Revenue Officer, Shawn Thornton, which is kind of funny to say, Chief Revenue Officer Shawn Thornton, considering the type of player he was on the ice. But that is the reality. He's made a home down there, a successful career down there, and our own Judd Sirott had the opportunity to talk with him.
We're joined now by former Bruin Shawn Thornton, who's currently in the front office with the Florida Panthers. And let's start off right here, Thorny. Congratulations on last year's Stanley Cup.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a pretty special run the boys had. We were fortunate enough to get the rings last night. So they included the executives with the hockey ops staff and the players. So I was part of the ceremony last night. It was great. They did a beautiful job.
Well, let's go further into that. You won Stanley Cups in 2007 with the Anaheim Ducks, 2011 with the Bruins. What did you appreciate about winning it as an executive? And I understand it was different. Yeah,
it's a lot different. It's great to be along for the ride, to be in this organization for 11 years, to see the dedication and the patience that the Violas and Seafoods have had with this organization, and continuing to invest in it and having that investment pay off and be a part of helping grow the fan base and selling sponsorships and ticketing and a lot of those things. It's great, but it's not the same as being the man in the arena. I have a unique perspective on that, probably, opposed to others in the organization that are on the business side. But I didn't really feel as much part of it as I did when I was a player, for sure. But again, I'm so happy for ownership and for the guys and for the coaching staff and for all the front office to see all their hard work come to fruition.
As someone who's been on the business side here for the Panthers for a number of years and also played for the franchise, it seems like the Panthers had been building the footprint, building the fan base in South Florida. But what sort of a jolt did the process get by the franchise winning its first Stanley Cup?
Yeah, I would say was for the last 10 years, the organization has really been building the fire. We've been growing the game at the grassroots level. We've been in the community. We've had a presence in the last 3-4 years, being consistent winners. And then, obviously with the Stanley Cup last June, I would say we poured gasoline on the fire. It's exploded. Revenues are through the roof. Ticket sales, our attendance, we were at 18.6 last year. I think it was our average attendance was 9th in the league. And we're expected to be above that this year. And it's just been great to see that, all of it kind of came together after the last 8, 9, 10, 11 years of really building it and having that fan base here to really embrace the team when they're winning is simply amazing. Watching, being at Game 7 and looking around, and there were some white and blue jerseys in the crowd, but it was 90% Panthers fans that showed up and shelled out for tickets for a Game 7 Stanley Cup, and it was just amazing to be a part of.
Can you give us a little perspective? So when you were playing with the Panthers and you first got to the Panthers after leaving the Bruins, just how far it's come from when you first landed in Florida to where it is now?
Well, I mean, we've talked about it as an exec team as we're going through and trying to create what the vision of this franchise looks going forward. We had 5,163 people were announced attendance my second game here. We were playing the Ottawa Senators on a Tuesday. Now, it was a necessary evil. Vinny and Doug and our CEO Matt decided to rip every single comp out of the ecosystem in Florida and just build it from the ground up. And I remember being in that game, looking around, and we had 5,100 announced, but I felt as a player it was like wives and scouts in here, and that was about it. And then like I just said, we just announced today we sold out of season tickets. We're on a wait list now. We're going to do close to 19,000 a game probably. We've had more sellouts than we've ever had in the history of the franchise, and again, expecting more this year. So it's really been amazing to be a part of on this side and see where we're at. And Florida's a hockey state now at the end of the day. I mean, between us and Tampa across the way, it's been pretty fun to see the sport explode in the state in the last decade.
You played with Sasha Barkov when he was first breaking into the National Hockey League. What do you love about his game and the type of captain he's become?
Yeah, I mean, he is the most unselfish individual that I've been around. You think, I'm not in there with him anymore, so his leadership style is probably completely different than, he was in his second or third year pro, and I was taking him to the Anchor Bar in Buffalo for wings because he's from the same town as too. I know they like chicken wings in Tampa. He told me last night he still didn't think they were that good, but his wings and his chicken is a lot better. But you know what? The way he plays the game, he could put up probably 100, 150 points a year if he was focused on offense. But he is so focused on doing whatever it takes to win while he's out there. He's probably the best defensive forward in the NHL, or he is the best defensive forward in the NHL. And I think the true test of players' greatness is how he makes the players around him better. And I think there's few guys in the league. He's one of them that whoever you put on his wings, they're instantly better players by playing with him.
I've talked with countless Bruins guys who had a chance to play with you on that 2011 team. And one of the things that they talk about all the time is how much that you meant to the culture as soon as you got to the Bruins and then the team winning the Stanley Cup in 2011. I guess with that in mind, when you saw Billy Zito jump on as the general manager of the team, how did he really influence the culture and what we see now from the Panthers?
Oh, I mean, he's had his fingerprints all over it, right? The way he has been able to look for character individuals while balancing the analytical side of it and finding some of these guys that are, I don't want to say diamonds in the rough, but maybe reclamation projects that have come in here and score 30, 40, 50 goals. It's been truly remarkable to witness. Now, I'm completely on the business side. I have absolutely nothing to do with the hockey side, so I'm not in there on the daily and seeing how he thinks about that and builds it. I'm kind of on the outside like everyone else, just looking in. But they're champions for a reason. It looks like the culture in that room, being around the guys a little bit that I am, they genuinely look like they and seem like they want to play for each other and are just good character individuals that can play the game.
Well, I recognize you're on the business side and you're not a part of hockey ops. How important was it to get Sam Reinhart back in the fold and re-signed?
It seemed pretty important from the outside looking in. Yeah, like honestly, I didn't have. I'm completely genuine when I say like I'm not on any of those conversations. But obviously, he was one of the top goal scorers in the league last year. He's a key cog for this machine that they have, and they've done a really good job, in my opinion, of wrapping up core guys for the prime. Looks like the prime of their career, and having this core together for the foreseeable future that bodes well for the organization as a whole.
You went through it the season after with the Bruins. What's the challenge of trying to repeat?
For me, the season after we've been to the finals 2 years in a row here, right? So it was the physical test of keeping your body ready to go night in and night out. And mentally, we think I thought I was invincible as a hockey player, and you just show up and keep going. But that grind wears on you, and really taking the precautions to make sure you get the amount of rest you need to, condition yourself in the off season. What it looks like, the guys are in phenomenal shape. So I think just the wear and tear on your body and being able to maintain optimal conditioning and avoid injuries throughout the year were key for us. And then the mental side of it too, just making sure you're fresh mentally every single day and there's no lulls, especially as you're going into a long grind.
Bigger challenge mentally or physically?
I actually go back and forth in my head on that all the time. I don't know. It's both.
I have to ask you a couple of questions about the Bruins before we spring you. If I had told you and Gregory Campbell, who's in the Panthers organization, in 2010 that Brad Marchand was going to be the captain of the team, how would you have responded?
I would have said he has some growing up to do, but his competitiveness could get him there. And he has grown up a lot, he'll admit it. And I'm extremely happy for him. I was fortunate enough to come back for his 1,000th game last year. His wife invited me, and it's so great to see where he has ended up. And I got nothing but the kindest words to say from Archie. He's been an ultimate professional. Even some of the antics. I think the antics used to take away from how great of a hockey player he was when he was younger. But I mean, he was a difference maker from his first year on the ice. I mean, there's no secret that he only played 14 games with me and Soupy for a reason. He was better than us and deserved to go up and play with Bergie.
So the other thing that, in talking to some of your teammates about Gregory Campbell and his relationship with Marshy, he said, I think the quote that I got from one player was, Soupy is relentless. He constantly gives it to Marshy, still gives it to him. What's he giving it to Marshy about?
I don't know, actually. I haven't been around that part of it. Again, Soupy's on the hockey side. I saw him last night. It's probably the first time I've seen him in months. I I think those two constantly banter, though. They always did. They sat beside each other in the locker room. They're pretty close. So I'm sure it's a back and forth, not just Soupy giving it to him. I'm sure Marshy's giving it back just as hard.
So I know you tell stories in the past about your Stanley Cups and some of the bouts you had. You were one of the best technical fighters of all time in the National Hockey League. But I want you to walk us through your penalty shot goal in 2012.
Yeah, amazing. I never got a shootout opportunity after that from any coach. Walking through it, I mean, I had pulled it off in practice a bunch of times. I could also go back to the forehand on that move if I wanted to. And I asked Timmy Thomas and I asked Tuukka, I'm like, should I try it? And they were like, yeah, you have to. And listen, I don't think anyone was expecting it. If I didn't pull it off, I didn't disappoint anybody. Nobody was expecting it anyways. And if I do pull it off, I mean, maybe we'll be talking about it 11 years later. So, a bit of luck there too, but I knew I could pull the move off. I just didn't know if it would go in.
Did you needle Claude at all? Like, hey, how about the power play? Let's go.
Not the power play, but when we got to shootouts, I'm like, you've seen it in practice. You've seen it in a penalty shot. Like, really, you're getting the sixth defenseman to go before me? I'm not that bad. I just proved it. But anyways, I get to retire 1 for 1, so I'll take the win.
So the other thing I need to ask you about, Big Papi, David Ortiz, was telling a story to Nikita Zadorov when those two had a chance to meet for the first time this summer at Fenway Park. And Papi tells a story, and I think you're giggling because you know where I'm going. He said that you left him tickets to a game, and you told him that the minute he walks in, I'm dropping the gloves with someone. Break down the story.
I love it. I go to his event every year his golf event every year down here in Florida, and the story changes a little bit every time he tells it, but the premise of it is right. I did leave him tickets. He came to a game. I think we had dinner like a week before too. And anyways, he was in our locker room right before the game to say hello, or in the training room, and we hugged it out. And he's like, "You gonna fight for me tonight, big boy?" or something along those lines. I don't remember it. And I was like, "I don't know. We'll see." And it just worked out. The timing that. We were down 2-0, I think. He just got to his seats, and I squared off with kid Tim Jackman right in front of him, like the minute he sat down. So he's convinced. I've told him it's not wasn't orchestrated, but he's convinced I did this for him. He's the best. The next day, he sent a bat to my house that said, like, "You are a bad man," or something like that, and he signed it. He's been a friend for a long time, and I love that he still remembers it and still tells the story. He's such a good dude.
Well, I'm glad that you clarified it, because in my head, the way he told it, I'm envisioning that he sits down and then all of a sudden you jump onto the ice. And I was going to ask, like, who was the unsuspecting character who had to face you for that? No,
we had fought before, and in this instance, he didn't really have a choice, but yeah, it was a little coincidental. But Papi still doesn't believe me. He's like, "No, you did it for me. You did it for me." So I love that guy.
See, it doesn't, you can't let truth get in the way of a good story.
Right.
Thorny, thanks for taking the time and being so generous with your time here today. Good luck this season, and we look forward to seeing you here down the road.
Thank you. Good talking to you.
Great stuff from Shawn Thornton, as always. Appreciate Judd Sirott, who will be on the next episode of the Hockey Hub podcast. We have another guest as well. Excited to talk to this Bruins legend, Rick Middleton, but not about the Bruins, Rick, about his induction and his team's induction into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's an incredible story, Adam. Look forward to hearing from Nifty. I've heard parts of that story in the past, and there's a lot going on still around that story that we can ask him about. But, it's phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, Paralympic sled hockey team being inducted into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. Here now is our conversation with Rick Middleton. Nifty, thanks for joining us. What does it mean to you to have your 2002 Paralympic sled hockey team inducted into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame?
I say it's the icing on the cake. We were inducted into the Olympic and Paralympic Hall of Fame in Colorado Springs 2 years ago, and we thought that was great. And we were saying that, wouldn't it be super if we could get into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame? Never really thinking that we would, but after all these years, over 20 years, It's kind of a surprise that we're getting all this recognition right now. But as my assistant coach Tommy Moulton said, we were the spark that lit the fire for sled hockey, really, in the United States. Once we won the medal, because we had heard that the program may be cut if we didn't win the medal. We heard that afterwards, not before. And since then, they've won a bronze and 4 golds in a row, and they're the winningest team in the world.
Nifty, remind us and walk us through the timeline on how this all came to be, that you became the coach of this fabled hockey team.
Well, the great thing is nobody knows this story. And we've been working for 8 years to possibly do a scripted movie. We've had several scripts, but we're about a couple days away from signing up with a company to do a documentary on it. And it's a great story, but I'll give you the short form. It happened with a phone call. A friend of mine back in 2001 called me, early 2001, Paul Edwards. He was on the U.S. disabled ski team. And unbeknownst to me, he was also a sled hockey player. But I didn't know that because I didn't know what sled hockey was. And he called me and he just said, hey, I heard that the U.S. national sled hockey team is looking for a coach because their coach quit after the World Championships last year, and they're going to be the host team in Salt Lake City in 2002 in the Paralympics. Would you be interested? And my head started spinning. I went, wow, that might be great. But then in the next breath, he says, you do know what sled hockey is, right? And I figured if I said no, he'd say, oh, never mind. So I said, yeah, I know what it is. I had never seen it. I didn't really have a clue. All I heard was Paralympics and hockey. And I thought it would be a challenge. It would be a lot of fun. So it took it to the next level. And when I talked to the manager, I told him I was interested, and he had the same questions. But then he went on to tell me that the team had never won a game. They were in Nagano. They won like an exhibition game, but not a game in the tournament. And then the World Championships, they didn't win a game. So now they were going to go into Salt Lake City and without a clue on what would happen. And they just didn't want to embarrass themselves. And, I looked at it as a challenge, not, no dreams of gold medals were in our heads. Let's put it that way.
And reading up on it, Nifty, the only reason the team qualified was because the U.S. was the host city in 2002. Exactly. So you come in and, reading the write-up, on the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame website about you coming in and changing the style of play and the culture. Where did you begin and what did that entail?
Well, first, they didn't have a style of play. What Tommy and I noticed, my assistant coach Tom Moulton and myself noticed early on, because we started watching some tapes from Nagano and from the World Championships, and all these guys did was chase the puck around the ice like a bunch of peewees because the other team always had it. So first, and then we noticed that their defense stayed in way too long, and the other teams would get breakaway after breakaway, and they couldn't win a game. They just weren't playing right. So we decided that we needed more speed and to put some of our best players back on defense, and B, we needed a system, a simple system, because some of these guys never grew up playing hockey. They either learned it in the rehab where they went to for an accident, or they just grew up watching hockey and found it in the rehab where they might have gone for, who knows, months and months as one of the sports, because they introduced wheelchair basketball and a lot of other sports. And a bunch of them took it. One of the guys that made the team had never played hockey growing up, had been in a terrible accident, lost both legs, and 3 years later he made the national team because he was a kamikaze. It was a lot of different levels of ability, but we did have 2 world-class players. I've made maybe 3 or 4 world-class players on the team, and that way we were able to compete. But honestly, after what happened was we selected the team in August 2001. We were supposed to play in a tournament with Canada and Japan up in Montreal on September 13th. and 9/11 happened. And we, again, they shut the airspace down, never went up there. And we never played another team for 6 months before we went into Salt Lake City. So all we did was practice amongst ourselves, but it gave us, Tom and I, time to instill a system that simple enough that everybody on the team could understand and hopefully use in a game. But we didn't know until we got into Salt Lake City.
Nifty, from your playing days, as you well know, there's, and especially as like for you, really a novice coach, I'm assuming.
Oh, I was a novice.
And new to the sport, their particular sport, what that learning curve was, and then having to get to know the players, their personalities, and then to get them not only systems-wise, but to have them be the best versions of themselves so you could reach this ultimate goal.
Well, you wouldn't even believe it, Rick. I mean, I called it the bizarro world of sled hockey. I did not know the beehive I was getting into, because as soon as I was even asked to coach, there was another coach from Chicago that thought he should be king. And who's this guy? Even though he played in the NHL, bringing him in from the outside, and he caused a lot of flack and problems with the team all the way into Salt Lake City. And it's a longer story, and we don't have time here. But as it turned out, almost half of the guys that we ended up selecting, and to his own credit, he ran the Rehab Institute of Chicago, and he got these guys a lot of ice time. They took them to a lot of tournaments, and they developed their skills on the ice. But he didn't skate. He used to coach them from the bench. And almost half of the guys on the national team we ended up picking from Chicago, and some of them, about 3 of them, were really allegiant to him. So not only did Tom and I have to teach them a system where some of them were having a difficult time, offensive zone, neutral zone, defensive zone, where do you go on the face-off, all this stuff. We had these other guys off the ice allegiant to him, and at one time trying to cause a mutiny to get me kicked off as coach. That's the story.
I didn't expect that layer to the story.
Yeah. That's why it's going to make a great documentary.
Yeah. Well, hey, by the way, do you and Tommy have your Screen Actors Guild card? Because when the movie comes out, you're going to have to play yourselves,
Well, we've been trying for 8 years to get a script written and a movie done, but we decided, because it's a lot quicker and a lot cheaper to do a documentary. And that way the story will be out there, and then hopefully people will be interested in maybe doing a movie down the road. But no, we just wanted this story to come out and be told. And it's a perfect time with the Hall of Fame coming up.
And so, Nifty, obviously, you come home with the gold, but leading up to the gold medal game, and whether it's the round robin or any other game that sort of stand out to you where it was sort of like the aha moment that you might actually have something special here?
Well, yes and no. I mean, when we went into Salt Lake City, we still had a little disruption on the team, like I told you about. But once we got in, we made sure that everybody was going to play, like they said in the 1980 team, for the name on the front, not the back. And so everybody bought into USA. All the team problems were, I was told, put aside. And our first game was against Japan. Now, as we were saying, they had never won a game, so I was worried that I wasn't even concerned about Canada #1 seed, Norway #2 seed. I figured if we were going to get in the bronze medal game, maybe, that would be the first goal. We'd have to beat Japan, Estonia, and probably Sweden. And the first game was Japan, and it was at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you could count how many people were in the stands. So we didn't have a big cheering section for us. And the game was 0-0 going in the third period. I turned to Tommy and I said, if we don't win this one, we might as well just go home. And turned out we scored 3 in the third. We won 3-0. And that gave us some confidence. We had a couple exhibition games before that, but, you can't put anything on them that we did well in. But the first game of the tournament, and they never beat Japan before. So this was a big win for us. But we're playing the next night against Canada, and it's been sold out for weeks. 6,000 people in the E-Center. We went from 60 maybe in the stands on Friday to 6,000. Biggest crowd these guys ever played in front of against the number 1 seed. So you can imagine how nervous we were. And as it turned out, we ended up spanking them 5-1. They never recovered. They didn't win another game. And Sylvester Fliss, nicknamed Sly, probably the best player, one of the world-class players, but had never really been seen at that level. He was one of the guys, I could recognize it in training camp. We put him back on defense. He wore number 4, ironically, and he scored a hat trick in the Canada game. And that was his coming out party because he ended up scoring 11 goals in 5 games with 3 hat tricks. And he ended up as the MVP of the whole tournament. But we didn't know that was going to happen. And when we beat Canada for the first time, like Brick, these tournaments. I played in 2 Canada Cup tournaments. You get some momentum. I played in 2 Canada Cup tournaments. You get some momentum. You're only playing for a week. It's not an 80-game season. You get some momentum. We started believing in ourselves for the first time. And now our next game was Norway. And we looked at each other saying, hey, if we beat Norway, we're in the gold medal game. We never dreamed we'd ever be there. It's just the way the schedule was set up. And but that Canada game was the game that for the first time in 8 months that we really believed we might be able to win something.
It's just such a phenomenal story. You win gold. I'm curious as we wind down this interview. We could talk all day, Nift. You know that.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious what your relationship is with the program today, and do you feel like you started a dynasty? They've won gold in 2010, 14, 18, 22.
I would like to say so, but they fired us. They fired us. I don't know whether they just didn't rehire us. Let's put it that way. And there was so much politics being played at that time because USA Hockey wasn't involved yet. They were helping out with the jerseys and maybe a few bucks, but they had not taken sled hockey on as a national governing body yet. They didn't do that till 2006. So for whatever reason, they didn't want us back. And that's fine. I always said you can only win the first one once. And they turned the gold into a bronze in Torino in 2006. But since then, USA Hockey took it over, I believe, right after the 2006 Paralympics, and they've won 4 golds since then. They not a lot of teams can even challenge them. Canada can, but the best player in the world, his name is Declan Farmer, and he is something else. You got to see him.
Well, 2002 started it all, Nifty, and that's why that team is going into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. Congratulations. Induction ceremony on December 4th in Pittsburgh. We really appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you around the Garden soon.
Well, I'll be there tomorrow night for sure. and thank you for having me on to talk about this. Like I said, I could talk about this all day because there's so many storylines, and it was such a great story. I'm just hoping this documentary comes out before the next Paralympics. It's going to be great.
Well, we were glad we could help get that story out there. So we thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nick.
And we thank you for joining us on the Hockey Hub. For Andy Brickley, Rick Middleton, I'm Adam Pellerin. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.